And we are live. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're listening, wherever you're listening. Hopefully, you're listening to this live. And if you are, today's conversation is probably going to make some people who are in the political libertarian world perhaps a little bit upset, which is the world that I hail from. But my thoughts on the topic we're going to be talking about today about obesity and Ozempic and other things like that. I've changed my mind quite a bit and have listened to so many different discussions, so many different angles on this. But my guest today seems to be someone that has not only personal experience with it, but also experience with clients and just a lot of kind of research and discussion around this topic. So I'm really excited to introduce today's guest. But before we get into the conversation today, make sure you hit all the links below to find out where you can find my guest, where you can find myself, everything I got going on. The band of Common Crown, we just played a show 4 days ago. It was our first show in a couple months, and it went really, really well. So we don't have any more shows until February. So if you missed us when we came to Akron, Ohio, you can come see us at the Raindrop Inn and at Jurgles in February. But Target Fitness through all the links below. Fox & Sons Coffee, use code Kyle at checkout, and Deemed Fit through the link below as well. And without further ado, let's roll the intro and we'll get into today's conversation with my guest. And welcoming to the show, Dr. Christle Guevarra. Hopefully I said that last name right. Hopefully.
Totally.
Awesome. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Absolutely fantastic. And I was really looking forward to this conversation after I heard you first on Revive Stronger. And from there, I listened to all the different appearances that I could find of you. And I've just been absolutely fascinated by your story and everything you've been talking about lately. So before we kind of start diving into that, why don't you tell my audience who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Oh man. You got a minute. I feel really old when people are like, tell me what you do. I'm like, I've done a lot of things over a couple many years. So highlights, I am a board certified family medicine physician, and I've also did a fellowship in primary care sports medicine. So, very much familiar from, womb to tomb, as us family medicine physicians call it. I also do some event coverage. I cover U.S. events for U.S. figure skating. I also work with RP Strength. I do wear many different hats there. Probably the biggest one that I've kind of handled thus far is probably on the back end of the YouTube channel. So our YouTube has done quite well. And so coming into that process this year and trying to optimize things and making sure that, the workflow goes pretty smoothly. It's a boring but necessary part of the of work that I find pretty oddly comforting in being able to handle and manage.
Nice. Yeah. The YouTube algorithm is definitely very tricky. And for me, I had Dr. Mike on about when I first started the podcast. I want to say he was episode number 44, and this is episode 372. So, yeah, when I tell people that I had Mike on, they're like, "Oh my god, you had Dr. Mike on?" I'm like, "Yeah," because now, I mean, you guys have really blown up over like the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And pretty much anytime I talk to anybody about anything fitness related, they're always like, "Oh yeah, do you watch Renaissance Periodization? Do you watch Mike Israetel?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, of course." Like, I had him on the show once. I tried to get him on again, but obviously you guys are very, very busy and have just so much going for you, and that makes me really happy because the message you guys talk about, I find to be very important, specifically when it comes to like nuance around diet and training, because as I kind of mentioned in the introduction, I'm from the more libertarian sphere, perhaps the more right-leaning political sphere, where people are very, very skeptical of absolutely everything for good reason. But, they all kind of look at me like a crank when I tell them, oh, well, sugar and seed oils aren't actually like inherently bad for you. Like there is signal in the noise here, but people just lose their minds because, oh, you bind all this quote unquote science. And I understand, but like, work with me here,
Right. Yeah. No. And I have changed my own personal stance on, these medications. So I've changed my stance over the last decade, being sort of having my toe in the fitness space while undergoing medical training. And then my own personal story has just been like, 40 some odd years of ups and downs and like, feeling like I am the worst person, like I am the bottom of the genetic food chain when it comes to staying fat and being fat, that like I just felt hopeless. So um I'm always I love these discussions, and so I'm happy to I understand where people come from and people being very skeptical. So I hear you. I was very skeptical and still sort of am at these medications are always not without a discussion of risk versus benefit, and not every if I wish I could be like, yes, these are great for everybody, and here's 5 things that you need to do today in like some sort of controversial statement that's like gonna knock it out of the park. But I'm just not that type. So I apologize in advance. Like if you were
No.
hoping that I was gonna be able to kind of sell it, then
No, of course, and like I said, I appreciate that, in all the discussions I've heard you have about this specific topic when it comes to Ozempic and other GLP-1 agonists, that you've been very nuanced and, really describe more so your experience and how it was life-changing for you, but,
yeah.
I think you've also been careful not extrapolating that to other people, and, we might as well kinda start diving into that. So, I have not done Ozempic, but,
Yeah.
much to kind of a point you were just making there a second ago, I did the carnivore diet probably
Okay.
about 5 years ago now, I wanna say, and I
Yeah.
did it for about 2 years,
Yeah.
and, I just like you, bounced up and down with my weight for years and years and years. I mean, I'm about 5'11",
Yeah.
and the heaviest I ever was about 250 pounds. So, I would be up to 250, I'd be able to drop 20, 30 pounds, and I put it back on, and just I
Yeah.
did that for years, probably up until, um, probably from the time I was about 17 until maybe 23, 24.
Yeah.
So, of course, this is back when, the low carb diet was really, really at its peak. And now it's kind of like saturated the marketplace. It's not like the only thing now. It's mostly just like I said, like people are anti-seed oil. But
Right.
so it hit its peak and I did carnivore for 2 years and I remember being good for a couple months and then just binging and then weighing myself the next day and feeling just like you said, worthless, the worst person in the world. I can't do anything right. Um,
Right.
and then I'd be on the train for another week or 2, and then my wife and I would go out to eat and all over
No.
again. You a Cheesecake Factory, 2 pieces of cheesecake, I'm done. So,
Right. Right.
eventually I moved on to more of a flexible dieting,
Yeah.
and, that's been more successful, but there still have been points where, like, I don't have the will, and I mean, I can will myself to do almost anything. I've done a half marathon, after not
Yeah.
running for months. I've been able to deadlift 535 pounds. I've been pretty
Yeah.
disciplined and successful. But I think you could relate to this as well. And I've heard you talk about this before, where like that food noise still does get to you. And if you got to a public event, you see the sweets or something, or at least that's the kind of like I don't want to say my trigger, but like something that I feel a little bit of weakness towards.
Mhm.
I see that and I'm like, oh, I really want it. And then like, yesterday and today, yeah, of course it's around Christmas time. So people bring the sweets into work. Hey, I'll have a cookie. I'll have a piece of banana bread, and then I'll
Yeah.
work it in. I use carbon, so I'll use that, track my macros and like adjust
Yeah.
my calories. I fit it in, but you still want to do more. So
Yeah.
um, I'm good now. I would like to be a little bit leaner, but,
Right.
once again, I'm not looking to hop on Ozempic tomorrow or anything like that. It's something I've thought about as in, like, I wanna know what this is, but I
Yeah.
haven't decided. So, what has your experience been like? I apologize for the long diatribe,
No,
but,
no, 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 not at all.
yeah, what was your experience like in specifically kind of bouncing with weight and then the food noise that I'm talking about? Because I think a lot of people could relate to that.
Oof. Yeah, great question. You talk about willpower, and I think I mentioned this in Steve Hall's podcast, where I had talked about finally just the food noise. I'm 4'11", for the record, and I think at my lowest scale weight, I had dieted myself down with weight training to about 130,
Mm,
high 120s. And at that point, I was lifting 5 times a week poorly. When I look back on my training journal, like I was just awful. Not recovering at all, kind of didn't manage my fatigue levels or my volume at all. And I was doing like 5 sessions of cardio a week at 45 minutes. But the thing that really like got to me was the tossing and the turning late at night. Like I actually just couldn't sleep. Like it would, because the gnawing in my stomach was just so like intense, and it was just visible, like audibly growling, and just constantly thinking about food, where I couldn't sleep at night. And then I was in med school, so I would have to just be a zombie all day in the cadaver lab, just barely functioning. And I remember that summer I had dieted down for about a year straight. I had gone down from 150 to about, 130, and just I thought that this is, just normal everyday life. Like I'm going to have to just not sleep and I can willpower my way through this. And sure enough, I failed anatomy. And I had to repeat anatomy. And so that was kind of like the kind of checkpoint of like, maybe this isn't okay, and maybe I
Right.
should really rethink either my life choices or rethink my desire to be lean. Ironically enough, I was losing muscle. Like I look back on those pictures and I look like a, sack of potatoes, like no muscle definition. So bounced right back up and kind of just buried myself in work. And I had hired a couple of different coaches to kind of help me get back to being lean. And thank God, one lady was just, gave me the real talk, like, hey, it looks like you're really struggling with chronic dieting. I don't think I can promise you to get lean, and I actually don't recommend that. What I do recommend is we get you at a nice stable weight and getting you to nice, consistent eating habits and behavior patterns. If you want to do something else, you can go find a different coach, but this is all I'm going to offer you, and this is what I recommend. So
Mhm.
I was like kind of thrown back. I was a little kind of like, ugh. But I ended up doing it, stabilized back up to 150, just kind of, during med school, any time where I would try to push a fat loss phase was sort of always met with um, a large amount of not resistance, but like the food
Mhm.
noise would just kind of exponentially go up. I remember being a teaching fellow and really not being able to pay attention during the day, because I was just so focused on food that I would just bite, kind of pick at my cuticles. I would kind of chew on them. And I was just I was like not really there.
Mhm.
Um, and so I still thought like, okay, this sucks, but whatever. Like, this isn't a big deal. Mike at one point tried to help me by creating what they called the evening hunger templates, which was basically bland chicken, like 3 cups of like greens, and I picked broccoli because it was the most filling. Very bland tasting, carbs like oatmeal. And I still remember just post diet trying to get into that maintenance phase and just shoveling all of that food down my gullet. And I was still hungry. I still want more food. But my stomach hurts so much because it's now expanded with the broccoli and the gas that's forming because I've eaten
Mhm.
that much fiber. Um, and just sort of feeling like, wow, I just failed. Like I can't even do that right. So it wasn't and I had gone to my physician and they had recommended a couple of other weight loss medications that are on the market that are not GLP-1. I've used Contrave before, which is naltrexone and bupropion. Broke out into hives,
Ooh.
severe hives all over my body, so that was a wash. I've also tried off-label Topamax, which is an anticonvulsant, which is also supposed to help with satiety. Um, I noticed that I was having word forgetfulness, which is not exactly what you want when you are in a medical resident in
Right.
the hospital. So that was a wash. Um, it wasn't until 2021 when I was a sports med fellow that my doctor recommended Wegovy. I initially said no. for whatever reason. I just kind of, I had failed all these other meds. I had failed, like I was still eat a very balanced meal of protein. I have green vegetables. I have some sort of carbohydrate, that isn't candy. So, oatmeal, rice, I can control my calories, but anytime I bring those calories down, it was just always met with such resistance that like
Right.
and it would just come right back up. So, um, yeah, and I said no because I felt like at that time, like I should be able to just kind of willpower my way through it. Like, why can't I
Mm.
just do that? Why can't, all these other fitness people on the internet space, like who are always pretty lean, like, oh yeah, I just kind of eat less, kind of just, just eat a little less on my plate and like, kind of the weight falls off and like, you just got to willpower your way through it. And I'm just like, well, why am I broken? What's wrong with me? Please. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that point right there is very important because I've felt like that a lot, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people feel that way. And this is why I think when I see some people who say, "Oh, I'd never respected an obese person" or
Oh,
something like that because they're not disciplined with what they put in their mouth. It's like, well, obesity is so complex, and
yeah.
I think a lot of people really miss that nuance because it's not just satiety. It's
Yeah.
not just your emotions. It's not just, the people you're around. I mean, food is everywhere. So
Yeah.
when I talk to people about the obesity crisis, it's frustrating because people want to find their one villain or their one
Yeah.
villain, right? Where
Mhm.
like the carnivores, low carb people, it's big
Yeah.
sugar, big whatever.
Yeah.
Vegans would probably say it's big dairy, big meat, or something like that. Like everybody's gonna have their chosen, out group that they say is like responsible for the entire obesity crisis. But like when you really zoom out, the answer I normally come to, and I'm curious your kind of opinion on
Mhm.
this, is that like, okay, we have so many social conventions around food
We
where
do.
everything we do involves having alcohol or there's food table there. We also live in a hyperpalatable food environment where the
Yes.
foods are a lot more calorically
Oh,
dense.
yes.
Yeah, and part of that is seed oils, added sugars, and stuff like that. Does this make them inherently bad? No, but we don't understand this. Like the average person doesn't pick up a can of Coke, drink it, and say, "Okay, that's 140 calories. I have to budget that now. I
Yeah.
can't have this somewhere else." People don't do that.
Right.
So I understand why people get freaked out about a high fructose corn syrup, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's inherently bad. Do I drink any of it? No.
Right.
And then also we just move around a lot less. Like we have a lot
Mm.
less
Oh,
active jobs now. So really, to kind of sum that up, social conventions around food, hyperpalatable food environment, and we move a lot less. Oh yeah, and I guess we eat a lot more as well. Whereas like
yes.
a lot
Yeah.
of these foods do have a lot more calories, and there are a lot of
Yes.
foods that are processed, which processing food isn't inherently bad,
No.
but it's bad when I add a whole ton of butter, canola oil, and a whole bunch of sugar to it, and now you don't want to stop eating it. You eat a 500-calorie brownie, and you're no more
Mhm.
full than you were 10 seconds before.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious your thoughts about all that.
Yeah. I think the big thing that gets sort of lost in the shuffle is the calories bit. You mentioned that it's not inherently the processing that's bad. It's the fact that now, because whatever processing we're able to do, now I've got this tiny little Twinkie that's like 300 calories for one tiny little bite of things, and so I find that that's and you're right. Nobody talks about like, oh, I need to budget this soda that I just drank because now that's 140 calories that I could have spent on, a couple of ounces of chicken with, some broccoli and some rice or what have you, like something that's going to fill me a lot more than that one soda can.
Right.
And so it's, if you don't get those calories right, like if, cause people, there was the Twinkie diet where,
Yeah.
yeah, where the guy from University of Kansas or somewhere in the Midwest decided to go on the Twinkie diet and was able to lose weight, just fine on it. It is the calories at the end of the day that we need to start thinking about. Like when you start thinking, like trying to blame it on the seed oil or blame it on, a vegetable or blame it on carbs, I think we miss the forest from the trees there. And you're right. It's the heart. I think one of the more difficult things that I think a lot of us also don't talk about is I've actually spent some time before going to med school, actually spending some time in these food deserts, volunteering. I would actually
Mm.
recommend people, I went on volunteer.org and look because I need it. You need to like boost up your, application. But also, I was genuinely interested in learning more about nutrition. And, people want tasty food. It's fucking delicious. Like, sorry, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
Sorry
no,
about.
no, no, I
Oh,
I meant
okay.
to say that earlier. Yes, you can swear. It's
It's
okay.
delicious. So yeah,
Yeah.
so this idea of education, like we need to educate people more. I'm
Mm.
not sure that that's like, I'm not sure if that's actually the case, or, I don't know if that's the correct approach to be taking when I have somebody who is literally like kind of stuck, kind of like looking at my table of free vegetables, by the way, like free cut up vegetables to kind of, with some dip, some low fat dip, and saying like that tastes nasty. Uh, uh, how am I supposed to, communicate to somebody? Like, where do we go from there as far as a conversation? Do I just need to be like, well, we need more education, and, let me tell you about the benefits? Like, no, what they clearly care about right now, at least in this moment, is they care about tasty food. And right now, what I am providing to them for free does not taste great. So, how do we meet in the middle?
Yeah, well, I gotta say, at least one thing that was kind of good with this whole keto craze is
Mhm.
that it does seem like there is more awareness around like healthier foods. So, like
Mhm.
when you go into the barbecue sauce aisle, because I mean, when I was a kid, my favorite thing in the world was kibasi with barbecue sauce. I just absolutely love it. So now they have all these like G Hughes,
Oh, yes.
Kinders, all
Yeah.
dieting hacks. And
Yes.
literally just before I came up here, I made a protein cookie with honey graham protein powder and Lily's white chocolate chips. There is like
Ooh.
yeah, oh, it's fantastic. But there's so many like foods now out there. Like if you go into a Costco or Sam's Club, a lot more health conscious options that are
Yeah.
genuinely pretty good. In like Quest, like I'm sure you probably remember 10 years ago, protein bars were awful. You
Yes.
couldn't eat them.
Yes.
Nowadays, it's like you're eating candy half the time, so
Oh, man.
man.
Yes. I love it. The options, are endless. I love the fact that, the protein bar, kind of companies have really
Mm,
stepped up and really not only focused on the macros, but also focused, on the taste. So there
yeah.
are other options where you do have a little bit of higher calories, but, it tastes way better than, some of the other stuff that, comes at less than 200 calories a pop.
Yeah, well, and I mean, even some of the stuff that like Bear Bells are the ones I can think of. Bear Bells and
Yeah.
Quest protein bars. Quest came a long way too, where Quest
Yes.
used to be damn near inedible, but like they really improved their recipes. So I think there's a lot of options out there, and you do kind of see this. I remember, like I said, 10 years ago when I was just drinking protein shakes and stuff like that, I never knew you could, actually cook with protein powder. And that
Yeah.
seems to kind of be changing the game. And I do see a lot more people kind of opting in for healthier options, which I do think is good. But like you said, it's like, how do you have that conversation with people? And it's not always easy because, like you said, people want tasty food, and sometimes going for the healthier option isn't always tasty. But it does seem like this industry's kind of changing. So
Mhm.
I think that's a net positive. So um, now, when it came to kind of white knuckling your way through dieting,
Yeah.
um, would you say that the vast majority of your problem was kind of the food focus when you would start to get leaner and leaner?
Oh. Oh, and I mean, leaner, yeah, would put that in quotes. If I wasn't on medication, I would be at, 411, probably about 170 was
Mhm.
probably like, so getting anything beyond above 170, it takes some work to actually do. And getting the weight off is actually a fairly easy trade-off. I've always loved training. That's always been the number one consistent thing for me. Like no matter what size I've been, I love being active. So, going to the gym and lifting heavy weights and, being on a set training program for lifting was always just a very easy thing for me, ever since, for the last decade, 15 years, 10, 15 years or so. So that was never a problem. It was always the, anything beyond, me trying to get below 170 was just the food focus would just get exponentially higher the
Mhm.
lower I would go.
Yeah, I recall the leanest I've ever been was about 179 pounds in my adult life, and I mean, I looked
Yeah.
fantastic, but
Yeah.
like you said, a low energy, incredible food focus where,
Yeah.
like, you're thinking about your next meal, you're overly excited, and I remember you talking about, going out to dinner and just, me, much like you, people are always astonished at how fast I put away my food in front of me because I also joke, I'm a flat rate technician by trade. So in the automotive field, we're not paid to eat. So it's just scarf it
Yeah.
down and keep going. But
Right.
you
Right.
know, every single time I go to a restaurant, if it's my wife and I mean, my plate is clean. There isn't even,
Hmm.
the slightest piece of broccoli or, a
Hmm.
little shred of the burger left over. I always have to finish everything and can't leave anything behind. I think I recall you saying something similar.
Oh yeah. And even if we were, heaven forbid, we go to a restaurant where there's a wait, oof. Like, I'm trying to have small talk with my friends who don't have problems dieting, and we're just, making small talk, but in my head I'm just like, get me the hell out of this conversation. Like, when's the food getting, like, when are we going to get seated? I'm already thinking about what I'm going to eat. I like, my stomach's growling, literally. Hope nobody can hear that, cuz, heaven forbid it sounds like a fart or something like that. And it's just not like I'm not present with these people, and that also sucks. Like, these are people that I care about, and all I can think about is food. And why am I having this conversation in my head? Like, and I can't, like, I can't, I wish I could just woo-saw it or listen to a mindfulness app, but the mindfulness app is going to tell me that these feelings are existing, or thoughts in my head, and I wish they would go away, but they're not. So here we are. Like, where do I go from here?
Yeah, so, I've heard from I think it was, one of the guys from Mind Pump who had
Hmm.
mentioned something similar to you when it came to getting on Ozempic or semaglutide, and they said that the food noise was greatly dampened. So, around when did you decide that semaglutide was a reasonable option, and, what kinda led you down that path?
Yeah. It was two things. One, I always appreciate my husband, Mike, who is very well versed in the kind of podcast space and has been very well known to be a great debater. Um, so, it for starters, I noticed for him, um, he had dieted down for a bodybuilding show, and I noticed how food focused he was, when he, weeks after the, kind of bodybuilding show had ended, he's still very food focused. And then we started talking about, well, we had a couple of different conversations. It's like, if this problem is affecting your ability to do your best at work, because I told him about, my past where I would be just non-functional. Why are in work is that important to you? Why are you, and this medication is able to kind of help you kind of improve your kind of, the things are going to help you with the things that are meaningful to you. Why wouldn't you take it? Why do we have air conditioning? Why don't we just grind through the heat? Why do we bother to use electricity when we could just, and he went down that whole rabbit hole of, like, the modern technologies that kind of help us get to where we are
Mhm.
today. Why are we live streaming? So there was that. And then also, just kind of coming to the realization that, what, maybe just something in, my genetics, just has my severity score, like my food noise scale, a bit off compared to others, and then I think also the other thing too is just kind of real talk. Right now, semaglutide is not on the WADA list. I know at some point I'm going to be competing in jujitsu. But I am not in a drug tested sport, and also it's not a banned substance. So right now, like, I don't have that going for me. I'm not trying to compete in natural bodybuilding where semaglutide is banned.
Mm.
So why do I feel like I need to just, is it just my ego that's, what is actually stopping me at this point? So I think it was January of 2022 where I finally decided to bite the bullet, and give it a shot, so to speak. And that's where it felt like a light bulb just kind of went off in my head, where
Mhm.
I felt like, oh, this is what thin people feel like. The, I mean, one, I was not as like hangry as always, but two, like it just seemed like instead of like seeing, a chocolate sundae and just be like, "Oh my god, this is the most amazing thing ever. I'm going to eat this entire thing right now." It's sort of like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I see that there is a lovely sundae right in front of me. I'm going to take a couple of bites, and when I feel full, I'm going to stop and like I'm going to enjoy this experience, and like this is going to be okay." Um that's I went out to dinner with my husband. We were in San Diego, and I didn't finish my red wine. I took a couple, I didn't I we shared an appetizer. I didn't scarf the thing. Um, and I left a couple bites on the plate, and like I was okay with that. So it was and I could actually have a conversation with him and, do that thing where I would see other people who are, seemingly thin, they would just be able to converse and like pay attention to everything else but their food. So for me to actually enjoy a conversation and not feel like I have to get this food in now, oh my god, was kind of a revelatory moment where I was like, holy crap, this is this is wow. This is quite nice.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard people talk about kind of like the obese resistant phenotypes, and I
Mhm,
know exactly kind of what you're referring to because it's funny you mentioned a Sunday. My wife and I would go to Ocean City in Maryland,
mhm.
and we would go to. They had this place that would have like these double brownie sundaes, and I would
Ooh.
be doing everything I could to get every last little bit of syrup
Mhm,
out of it because I'm like, man, this is just so awesome. Like, I can't wait to just devour this whole thing. Um, and like I said, I've been able to white knuckle it and stay lean enough that I'm happy. But I think there's a lot of other people in this situation where, like you said, they're very, very food focused. When you got to a restaurant, it's like, oh, I just whenever the food gets in front of me, it's gonna be gone. I
mhm,
can't wait. Um,
mhm.
and like I think that's a normal experience for a lot of people, and it shouldn't be because like you said, you look around, there's other thinner people who just are able to stop. And it's a very, very, I don't want to say powerless feeling, but I mean, it's almost like autonomous, where just like
Yeah.
you don't even think about it. You just kind of
Right.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, even, the other day, like, notice that I'm not as like, and, Mike has even said at some point, like a couple of months down at, the line after I had started the medication, um, he had told me at one point that he noticed that when I was like dieting and then post diet and I would start eating, he actually told me that I had like this look on my face of like somebody who had sort of lost, like, just, there was just this look in my eyes where I was just focused on food and I was going to do everything, to like get that food in me. And he was like, yeah, I just felt like, I felt really bad because I knew where this was going to go. Like your weight is going to climb back up. We're going to do that same kind of song and dance over again. And I knew how sad you would end up being or upset you would be or emotional because, you would feel kind of like a failure, so to speak, because you did all this work to lose the weight and I can't even maintain it. And it's not even like I'm trying to get to a stage lean, kind of physique. At my best, I'm 20% body fat. So I'm sort of fluctuating between 20, 25, which like maybe my genetic, like I came out a fat baby. So maybe because I had so many fat cells like coming out of the womb that I was sort of already just like kind of screwed to begin with, so to speak.
Yeah, it's allegedly you picked the wrong parents, right? So a lot of people get concerned about,
Mhm.
and I think this is almost quackish, where they say, "Oh, well, big pharma is paying for this drug, so should you, or I can't trust anything that big pharma is behind." But
Mhm.
I think people need to stop and think like, okay, is this actually helping? And what's some of the data surrounding this? And, is there something here? Because I don't know if you know the name Max Coleman, but he worked under Brad Schoenfeld.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, he's a friend of
Yeah.
mine, and
Yeah.
he's done the show a couple times. And he was actually
Yeah.
kind of the one that first kind of put the seed into my mind about Ozempic not being this, giant big pharma conspiracy, because he was like, the first 5-year trial came out, and compared to obesity, it is just leaps and bounds better. So I remember thinking at that moment, I'm like, am I wrong? Is there actually something here to this? And he was like, obesity is a bullet wound in the general public. And right now, this is the only band-aid that we have. He said it's not perfect, but it's a band-aid no less. And ever since I started looking at it through that lens, and I even started reading some of the studies myself, um, I started becoming more and more convinced. So, did you kind of have a similar process with semaglutide, Ozempic, or were you, a little bit more open-minded?
Like, in terms of thinking that it was a giant conspiracy or
Just like, kind of, where did you start when you first heard about it?
oh, honestly, I was in fellowship, so I didn't really care about anything except for publishing my own paper and, which I had done from start to finish myself, and then graduating and getting the hell out of Vegas. So, honestly, I didn't really think it wasn't until I will be very honest, started doing a lot more research and reading up on it afterwards. I had seen
Oh,
some, so I take that back. So the GLP-1 agonist class is not a new class of drugs.
of
So
course.
I, Saxenda had been on the market prior in 2014 for weight management, weight loss. And so I guess I had done some research on that, because I have prescribed that for diabetes and then tried to prescribe it for weight loss. And every single time insurance was like, nope, you got to pay $1,400 a month.
Oof.
And then, yeah. So and then the conversation sort of dies. So
Mhm.
I didn't really start to really take a deep dive until, maybe about a year, year and a half ago, probably about a couple months into my own journey.
Mhm.
So I kind of went backwards. I, was kind of at the end of my rope,
Sure.
um, and started looking at it. But then I also realized that we've had these GLP-1 agonist drugs for about 20 years now on the market. Yes, it is fair that, the semaglutide has been around since 2017 or 2019, Saxenda since 2014. So we have data on these drugs. So, and these hormones had been already identified in the late 70s and 80s. So, like, if you actually go down the well, I mean, this has been an ongoing process, for decades now. So I'm not, I guess that is my bias. I am a scientist by trade, so
Of
I
course.
um, I'm just trying to think of how, like, when am I ever skeptical about things in terms of like
Mhm.
the science, being some
Of
sort of
course.
conspiracy? But I am of the camp that, I am in agreement with Max, maybe to, I don't know if I'd put it like a bullet in, the wound of like a,
The
obesity. Yeah.
obesity
Yeah.
being, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I actually completely, if I was gonna, start telling war stories of like what it is like to be, on, hospital medicine and like kind of
Mhm.
seeing the worst of the worst, with both obesity and diabetes at the same time. Um, you know, it it is man, the first, obviously lifestyle is where we would love for people to be at, but I also
Mhm.
understand that because of multi, various reasons, like it's not always cut and dry. You can't just say, hey,
Right.
like, so I am in full support of these medications because the alternative is obesity. And
Mhm.
more often than not, it causes so many complications that it's just not worth it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's the exact position that I eventually came to. And most people say, "Oh, well," kind of like we were saying earlier, "Oh, well, why don't you just white knuckle it through, go into caloric deficit, do carnivore, do this, do that." Like we've kind of been laying out throughout the show, it's not that simple for a lot of people. And, nobody would say we should put Ozempic in the water, but, the point is that like, if there's a Band-Aid available and by all available data, it's safe, really. I mean, there's some side effects for some people, but you're gonna have that no matter what. You're
Yeah.
not going to get any kind of perfection out of anything. Why not have that treatment available? So, what would you say to somebody who kind of came at you and was open to it, but was skeptical? What does the research say?
I guess the question, a lot of the reasons why people are skeptical, I always ask like what. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people talk about Ozempic butt and Ozempic face. They're worried about muscle loss,
Yeah.
and that has since been, the a lot of the earlier research studies. When you take a look at the methods, it's very difficult to kind of, one, get people all on the same page with just even taking the drug, but then you look at like the calories that they had to, put people on to try and like normalize it. And a lot of times when they talked about exercise, it was more along the lines of walking, or like, I didn't see too many instances of like resistance training or some talk of like lift a weight, I don't care what it is. So that hadn't always been clear when I did my deep dive with the literature involving GLP-1 agonists and weight loss. Um, and it would be nice for somebody to do a study on that. I'm sure somebody is at some point, but you know, uh, to try and get that many people in your, one does not simply conduct a research study. um, so the other thing, yes, I am very upfront about, some people are very skeptical and hesitant about side effects. So nausea, vomiting are also very common, and they are dose related, and they are very much related to the drug itself. And for some people, I know some people who actually can't even tolerate the starter dose, which is the very lowest dose, just to get used to side effects. It becomes the nausea, vomiting is so severe that they, either have to switch or to, Zepbound. Tirzepatide is the dual agonist. So it's not just GLP-1, but also the GIP affects the GIP receptor,
Mhm.
or find something else entirely. So, so the, I guess I'm not sure if you had any other particular like skepticisms that people have come up. Like I'm trying to think off the top of my head where,
So, yeah,
yeah.
like specifically the side effects where,
Mhm.
um, I think a friend of mine had shared something on Twitter saying like, "Oh, these people, you know, something to do with, going to the bathroom, essentially, where their bowel movements were no longer
Mhm.
frequent or the same." Um, and kinda like people get concerned about, "Oh, well, this slows your gastric emptying, so this
Mhm.
has to be a problem."
Yeah.
How would you ameliorate people's concerns with that?
Yeah, I think yes, it does. That is actually part of how this medication affects
Mhm,
affects satiety by slowing down gastric emptying. The couple of things to keep in mind is that is dose dependent, and also trying to you have to be mindful of your diet more so than ever.
mhm.
People complain about constipation, and then I ask them what they had for to eat today, and they list like a handful of almonds and some blueberries, and I'm like, that's not a meal. Like, what goes in must come out. So if you actually aren't eating anything, like truly not eating anything, and that's another, a problem that, a concern, a real valid concern with taking these medications. How are you supposed to poop something out if you are literally not eating real meals? How if you're not eating vegetables? And so, and I think that's where we really, I love the medical community. I love my people. I think we could do a much better job of kind of working with some of the evidence-based fitness people in the space of like how to actually tailor a diet such that it actually matches the, drug. Like, so, I don't want to crank somebody up to the highest dose possible. If they are trying to maintain their weight, or, I don't want to set a caloric deficit that's too high, or set them on a caloric deficit for too long of a period. Like, they need to take breaks because there are, factors, their diet, you know, diet fatiguing indicators that you need to pay attention to. Because at a certain point, some people complain of shitty sleep. Some people can't exercise. They have low energy. Like, you don't want to be in a low energy state for like months and years on end. So I see a lot of people who end up chronically dieting, and then they hit this plateau and they're like, I can't figure out like why I can't lose any more weight, but I feel like total garbage. And it's like, you need to take a break. You need to raise your calories like steadily, and maintain at this plateau. Get your calories up, get your energy levels up, and recover from months of dieting. So that's one factor. Um, and the other thing, yeah, so it's the dose dependent relationship, and it's actually getting some fiber and some healthy food inside of you on a semi regular basis that you really need to be mindful of with the constipation. So,
Mhm. So the other one that people have thrown out there, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm
Mhm.
curious your thoughts, would be okay. So people say, well, when people go on Ozempic, they lose half muscle and half fat. So if they lose 10 pounds total, they lost 5 pounds muscle, 5 pounds fat. Is there a way to remedy that, or what's the deal?
So are these people actually like getting a DEXA scan before and after? And also, I would say that the problem, I'm not sure how exact. I'm very skeptical of that, in the sense of, if you actually have a rate that is no more than, 0.5% of your body weight per week, at a reasonable rate, and you are going for no more than 12 weeks at a time of dieting, and you actually have a strength training program that actually, encompasses progressive overload, like, I'm actually challenging myself. It's not like, I pick up 3-pound dumbbells and just kind of do whatever. Um, I would argue that more often than not, you will be able to maintain that muscle mass.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, and that seemed to be when I started digging into the research on it, and even when I talked to Max, that it seems to be most people who in these studies lost half muscle, half fat.
Hmm.
It's the same way if you diet regularly but don't resistance train and don't eat sufficient protein.
Hmm.
You'll lose half muscle, half fat because your body's just looking to get rid of the weight, any which way possible. My mother-in-law, I think, just commented, "How do you get over the nausea from these meds? I was on Ozempic for 2 weeks and I could not eat at all." I'm guessing that's probably like you said earlier, the point, and obviously this isn't medical advice.
Right.
It's just you taper up the dose, and like you said earlier, some people may have to go to trizepatide. I think you
Yeah.
said.
Tirzepatide's the generic term for generic name for the GLP-1 GIP agonist. It affects both of those, but because it also affects the GIP pathway, the nausea seems to be much either gone or way
Mhm,
more tolerable than semaglutide. So definitely something to talk to your doctor about.
mhm,
Yeah, and they're also dose dependent. And for the first 4 weeks should be at that lowest dose, to just make sure that your body is used to the medication, and that, you're not having any, of these side effects. So
mhm.
seems for some people it can get better with time. So I do remember having some nausea and vomiting at first, and it seemed to get better as the weeks went on.
Mhm. So, what would you say to people who say, "Oh, well, these people are just going to go on it. They're going to lose the weight, but as soon as they get off of it, they're going to put the weight back on."
So the studies had looked for people who had gone off the medication. Um, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head.
course.
A good majority of people gained some of the weight back. And so I love the fact that, people want to explore that. And I am definitely of the opinion that, if a patient comes to me on this medication and wants to, expresses their desire to come off of it, I am all for it. I do, as a both a physician and sort of a project manager, I do love to kind of paint, give them potential scenarios that they might run into so they are never thrown off, so to speak. So, worst case scenario, you do gain the weight back. But the good news is that I would hope that your behavior, between your behavior change and the fact that this drug is always going to be available, we can always put you back on it, and please don't see it as a failure. Um, there is, and I do know people anecdotally who have reported either weaning themselves down from the dose or removing it entirely and seem to do well,
Mm,
like in terms of being able to keep the weight off or at least decrease the dose to an amount that they seem comfortable with taking in the long term.
mhm. Okay, yeah. Susanna alla Richard, understanding's one goal is a priority. Thank you for the
Yeah.
333. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And um I think the important thing here is, it probably is better if people lose the weight and at least get to live in a thinner body and understand how great that is for them. And hopefully that kind of at least puts them in the right mindset. And then, also additionally, I'm sure a lot of people probably have, like you said, this food noise always
Right.
kind of going on in their head.
Right.
Maybe if they spend a time at a lower body fat point, then maybe that food noise goes away. Maybe it's different. So I guess there's a whole nother conversation that I'm kind of curious about your
Yeah.
thoughts where I'm guessing you're familiar with like the body fat set point theory, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Do you think that there would be something to that? So let's say somebody like me, right, goes
Mhm.
from 250 all the way down to let's say 180, 170.
Mhm.
Um, let's say this person spends a lot of time at that weight and
Yeah.
then they go off. Do you think that if they were to spend enough time in that, specific body weight, then that food noise could potentially be gone? I know you said you've seen some people anecdotally, but what do you think over time? Do you think we're going to see more of that, or yeah, what are your thoughts?
I hope so. I would very much hope so. The the other part to that, not only with food, man, that's a really great question. Because the other part to that is what amount of calories are they, I'm not sure what are their current maintenance calories at that leaner body weight. Um, I would hope so. I'm actually just unsure as to where that's gonna go. And I'm not sure I'm well equipped to man. Yeah. Yeah, you stumped me.
Yeah, no, that's okay, that's okay. Because it's something I've thought about quite a bit because, when you see people who lose weight, it does seem like a lot of people tend to find that happy balance, which it seems
Mhm.
like you're at that happy balance too, which,
Yeah.
hopefully, you're doing well. And like I said, I've watched as many interviews of you that I could, and this whole conversation fascinates me. So I guess the big question there would be, is this the silver bullet for the obesity crisis? Because some people have kind of marketed that way. I think you're a little bit more nuanced in your thoughts, but if you want to expand upon that, go ahead.
Apparently, the obesity, incidence or, is starting to take a little bit of a dip, like, in the curve here in America, so there's hope. Um, there's always gonna be people on the spectrum who have other reasons to be obese, not just, like, food noise,
Of course.
who, and I don't know how this works for, yeah, some of the more kind of people, kind of the 500, 600, my 600-pound life, like I'm not as familiar with how that is going to shake out, like if I haven't personally kind of interacted or helped treat that population, so I'd be very curious to see what the literature is um, on that. um, but also, man, there's people who also, people who are skeptical, like I've seen people take some of these medications and still manage to, come back with an A1C of like 10 and are still haven't really lost weight. And so, there is that, like, not Debbie Downer, but when I think back to, trying to, like, give people hope and let people know that they don't have to be on drugs for high blood pressure, diabetes forever. Like, we can, with lifestyle, can work through that and get past it. Sometimes it's just sort of feels like a kind of a never ending slippery slope of like, not despair, but like just sort of disappointment. So
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah. I kind of have hope, and I guess the other thing that some people who are a little bit more in the health industry are concerned about is, oh, we're not going to need personal trainers anymore because everybody's going to be
no.
having this, and everything's going to go away. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's like the biggest. I feel like we need personal trainers now more than ever. I can't solve everybody's problems in 15-minute
Yeah.
physician visit, for the love of God. Like, trying to do the things like online coaching, trying to bridge that gap. Oh my God, we need, like, personal trainers, online coaches. Like, this drug is actually going to be a godsend, because now, you're going to have people binging on things less. You are still, like, we still need you. Like, you are an important part of this, like, multidisciplinary team. Good God. No, that's like one of my big rants of, like, if I can drive that point home, like, if, for online coaches, being okay with working with people who are on these medications is just going to be a big boost to you, to them. I would hope that people can put their biases aside and just focus on the person in front of them who is looking to them for help. So
Mhm. Yeah, I think that goes well beyond just health and wellness as well. And I really like that you kind of brought it to that point as well, because I think as people, if there is, let's say, mass adoption, which it does kind of seem like there is, of this potential treatment for people, then maybe they'll decide, okay, well, if I lost all this weight, then maybe I can prioritize now, working out, because I feel better about
yeah,
myself and I feel good enough because I don't have all this excess weight on me, that
yeah,
now I can maybe start to change my body composition.
yeah. Agreed.
Mm.
Agreed.
Nice. All right. Well, this has been a very fruitful conversation, Dr. Crystal. I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else you kind of want to round off the discussion with before we wrap it up there?
No, I just, it's not it can be a life-changing medication for a lot of people in this country. It does not come without a discussion of risk. And I think being honest about those discussion of risks versus benefits, and just keeping that dialogue open, and I think we need to continue having those conversations, not just in the office between physician and patient, but also out in social media, because there's so much misinformation about stuff and so many sensational headlines that come out meant to scare people, that unfortunately, it plays with people's emotions. And then once people's emotions get involved, it makes it very difficult to come up with a very logical solution at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can everybody find you, support your work, and all that good stuff?
Um, so the I'm on Instagram, Dr. Christle, Christle, rpstrength.com. And then if you look up the RP YouTube channel, Dr. Mike Israel is on there. So that's, we've got all that good stuff and a lot of good information out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said in the beginning, definitely go check out Renaissance Periodization, because the information you guys have is absolutely fantastic. And then definitely over like the last year and a half, the production on the videos has just been absolutely incredible. And
Oh,
you guys have done so much good work.
thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Well, and of course, I want to compliment you for kind of talking about this topic, because um, I'm glad to see somebody talk about this who has experience with it and can kind of give their take on it from the perspective of somebody that I think, I know it definitely resonated with me when I heard you on all the different shows, specifically, Revive Stronger and The American Glutton. Those were the two that kind of stuck out to me the most. But yeah, just keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening. And if we don't got anything else, we'll call her there. Thanks, everybody.